Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Kamhi, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Kamhi, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Listen the old-fashioned way, on air, or online at iHeartRadio, Odyssey, TuneIn app, smart speakers, nccradio.org, or on our own award-winning WHPC app. And podcasts of the show are also available wherever you get your podcasts. And we're so happy to have as our guest today, Danielle Pashko. Danielle is an author, certified health coach, and yoga instructor. And she is certified as a health coach from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition and helps clients develop different kinds of health programs to support a healthy weight, to detox, and also with a discussion of customized nutraceuticals. She provides consultations for healthy menu development at established restaurants and children's schools, and she has often been quoted in the media, including on Fox and USA Today. Danielle is the author of Breaking Your Fat Girl Habit and Smile at Your Challenges. Thank you so much for joining us today, Danielle.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So it seems like so many people, you started on your journey towards learning more about natural and holistic health through your own health challenges.
Actually, it started way before that. The health challenges happened while I was already a practitioner. Okay. What happened? I actually got interested in natural health because of my mother's health challenges. My mother had cancer when I was 8 years old, and she started using a lot of different alternative therapies to try and heal herself, like meditation and visualization and macrobiotic diet and homeopathic medicine. And unfortunately, she passed away when she was 38, but that's what really propelled me to become interested in the natural health world. As I was working, unfortunately, I ended up getting sick myself, but I had already been working in this field for about 10 years.
Okay. And so if you'd like, you can share, what you found helpful or how those challenges were dealt with, knowing all the things that you know.
Sure. So most recently, and the thing that I really want to address, unfortunately, I've had some health challenges throughout the years, but Lyme disease was something that was very difficult to tackle. And I think it's becoming more and more common, especially now with the warmer seasons and more ticks being out there. So what I found to be really helpful for myself and also with people that I work with, compression therapy, believe it or not, has actually been a really great tool. And when I'm talking about compression therapy, I'm referring to compression boots, which really work well to help with pain. They help with circulation. They help to regulate blood pressure and heart rate, which can be sometimes disturbed when you have a type of Lyme disease or even condition like long COVID. Also, I've had a lot of success with mushrooms, and I'm referring specifically to mushrooms called AHCC that come from shiitake. And they're more potent than eating just regular mushrooms. They actually work to modulate the immune system, which is very important when you're having Lyme and also long COVID like I did. They help to decrease inflammation. They're antiviral. And that's really important because when we see people who have Lyme disease or even long COVID, a lot of times they have viral reactivation of old viruses they may have even had as a child, like Epstein-Barr virus or potentially the herpes virus. So it really helps with that. And it also works as a prebiotic, which helps the gut microbiome. And we know that 70 to 80% of our gut immune system lives in our gut. So that's very important. If anyone's interested in that, they can go to ahcc.net. I also really love acupuncture, and I still do that a few days a week because it's just so good for pain and migraines.
Okay, well, when you're saying you do that, are you an acupuncturist?
No, I'm not an acupuncturist. I actually Sorry, I don't do that with people that I work with. I actually have acupuncture.
Oh, so you
therapy I do
use
myself and
acupuncture
recommend.
as a client. You find that that's useful. Yeah.
Right. And I think there's a lot of that you can do in terms of working in nutrition that I like to help my clients with, but I think it's kind of a multi-pronged approach where you need to bring in other therapies as well if you're dealing with something like Lyme or long COVID. So, acupuncture is one of those things. And regarding diet, I'm really big on an anti-inflammatory diet. And as you know, with your many years of experience, obviously processed foods and inflammatory triggers like gluten and wheat and sugar and dairy and even sometimes caffeine or alcohol could really set people off. But also having a diet that's more focused on colorful fruits and vegetables and wild fish and if you're going to have meat, grass-fed meat and poultry and even certain spices that can be anti-inflammatory. So I'm really big on making sure that people are cleaning up their diet if they're dealing with any kind of condition like that. And then the other ones are just really yoga, because I've been doing it so long and I've taught yoga for so many years, but it's also something that I just recommend for people who have the patience, because it's so restorative. And a lot of times if you have a chronic illness, especially like Lyme or long COVID, the two that I've experienced, it really helps to calm the nervous system. And that's what we really need to work on, because relaxing, breathing, and getting us to calm down helps us be in a better place where we can heal better. And the same goes I talk a lot about meditation and prayer, and really it's a personal choice what someone chooses to believe in, but just getting into the mindset of having a positive belief system. And it really helps to rewire the brain and trust that healing is occurring. And our brain is so powerful. So the more we can visualize and imagine ourselves being healthier, the more likely we are to be able to get in a place where we can actually heal better.
So those are all great suggestions. So when someone speaks to you, sometimes like everything you laid out, that's certainly what's part of a healthy lifestyle.
Right.
It's not so easy to make those changes if people are not used to eating that way and exercising. So what do you use to help with your clients to get them motivated?
Well, I try to be realistic with people. Especially when it comes to their diet, I think that's a really hard place to start, because people are very set emotionally with their eating. So I try to get them to do as much as they can and make substitutions. So if they tell me that, they can't live without having something sweet in the morning, then possibly I'll try to have them maybe have a smoothie that has a little bit of texture in it and sweetness. So it maybe can take the place of something else that's maybe sugary and not healthy for them. Or if they're used to eating bagels, maybe I'll tell them instead, let's switch over to having gluten-free bread and maybe, using something healthy like avocado instead of cream cheese. And I want to make it realistic for people to be able to do these things, because it can be overwhelming. And especially when you're dealing with a chronic condition, you're almost forced into making all of these lifestyle changes if you want to have the best recovery. So it's really just trying to do a bit of hand holding, and they start to see that as they go week by week. I tell them, don't look too far in the future, because that seems overwhelming. If you say, oh my gosh, I have to do this for the next 10 weeks. But if you say, I'm going to do this for a week and see how I feel. And if you have a small incremental change and you start to feel better at that point, then it's easier to keep going, because as you see a reward, you start to feel a little more confident in your healing.
That's true. So that does get to reinforce that positive behavior.
Exactly.
Which is excellent. Let's talk a little bit about long COVID, because that's a new problem.
Right.
We never heard about that 10 years ago. I've been doing natural medicine since 1964. Yes, that's what it says.
It's incredible.
And we did not have long COVID. That was not a discussion. I mean, we may have had similar things, but it didn't have that name. So that is kind of a new illness. A lot of people think it's linked to after someone has an acute bout of COVID, but very often it's from other things as well. So it's kind of become an umbrella about sequelae following acute COVID. What are some of the symptoms that people are experiencing with that?
It varies so much. It can long COVID could be, we always hear about brain fog, but it can be shortness of breath for some people. Other people can experience dizziness. Exhaustion is a big one. Post-exertional malaise after exercising or doing anything physical. They feel really tired. Just not even having a lot of the brain function, or even your joints could hurt. You could have body pain. It really varies. And it's interesting because when I had Lyme disease, the symptoms were so similar to long COVID. There's over 200 symptoms that you could possibly have. And that's why.
Let me stop you there 1 minute, Danielle. When you had Lyme disease,
yes,
was that accurately diagnosed? Because I find that's one of the biggest challenges.
Not the first time. And it was really confusing for me because years before I had thyroid cancer. And when I talked about health challenges originally, while I was working all this time, that was the first one that came to me. And when I first had Lyme, I actually thought I had a recurrence of thyroid cancer, because it's strange when you have a thyroid or autoimmune, and then you have Lyme, and then you have long COVID. There's so many overlapping similarities. It's very hard to decipher what's happening.
Well, with your thyroid situation that you had earlier on, what was the treatment that was used? So
I ended up doing a surgery. I had a total thyroidectomy, and I had radiation. And unfortunately, I'm very into natural medicine, but sometimes there's a time and a place for allopathic medicine, and that was the time. So it did help with my healing, and now I do a lot more in terms of my diet to maintain my thyroid health.
And I imagine you have to stay on thyroid.
I'm on thyroid medicine. Yes, I'm on T4, but I'm also on desiccated thyroid hormone as well. I have to do a little bit of T3 also.
That's a good idea. See, regular endocrinologists or people who are treating those individuals who have had that surgery rarely include that. And it's so important that you do.
It's very important. And actually, I never needed it, the T3, the natural thyroid hormone, until I had Lyme. And even some endocrinologists don't understand the connection between having Lyme disease and how that could even impact your thyroid, and it can affect your thyroid tissue and the whole area and your functioning. So at that point, I started needing the T3, whereas I didn't before.
Well, I want to remind our listeners that you are listening to Herbally Yours right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. And we bring you Herbally Yours every week right here on WHPC. Today, our guest is Danielle Pashko, who is an author, a certified health coach, and yoga instructor. And you can find out more all over in different places. We'll have those links on our archive. But an easy way to go is to go to Pashko Wellness. That's PASHKOW.
Okay. No W at the end.
Right. KO and then wellness. That's where I'm seeing the W. So it's PashkoWellness.com. And you have a lot of beautiful things going on there.
Oh,
and you have had certainly your share of health challenges, starting, like you said, probably even before, but you went through cancer therapies. You actually had your thyroid irradiated and removed. So you've had to be on replacement therapy your whole life. And then you had additional health challenges as well that you've been describing to us, how common they are. And especially now, long COVID.
Long COVID, yes. There are around 20 million people, probably even more, that are in the United States alone, that are being diagnosed with long COVID. And think about all the people who are not even reporting this or don't even know what their symptoms are coming from. And it can happen from a very mild case. A lot of people are under the misconception that you have to have a really bad case or have a pre-existing condition to have long COVID. And that's not true, unfortunately. I wish that were the case. And I'm seeing a lot of that. I don't know if you are, but it's scary. And thankfully there are things that we can do to help to mitigate some of the issues that come along with the symptoms. But it's
well, how likely, if someone has some of the symptoms, and let's list them, and if they go to their regular conventional doctor, are they going to get a diagnosis of long COVID?
They're lucky if they do, put it that way.
That's what I would say.
There are some doctors who are very open-minded outside of the box of what they have understood. If you go to sometimes a traditional doctor, they have certain pathologies that they're used to treating. So, if it's like a cold or a flu, or if it's cancer or diabetes or heart disease or something like that, that is very linear. Like, okay, you have this diagnosis and we're going to give you this to treat it. If you have long COVID and you come in with these symptoms presenting as I'm dizzy and I'm out of breath and my brain's not working and I'm tired, and they may brush you off or even say that it's psychosomatic, and that's really sad. So that is what's happening to a lot of people. And I would say if you really believe that you're having long COVID, the best thing to do is to try to find a doctor who specializes in chronic illness, because those are the people who have seen these conditions that are kind of hard to diagnose and a little out of the box, and they will do the right testing for you. And they also should do a viral panel just to make sure that you're not having this viral reactivation of things that maybe were present earlier in life. I've even seen cases where people had asthma as a child, and suddenly their asthma now is popping up again in their 30s. It almost seems like COVID targets latent infections or viruses or things that were your weak spot. Not for everybody, but for some people, it's confusing, because you can say, hey, I'm one of those people who I ran 5 miles a day and I hiked and I was doing yoga and I was so healthy, no pre-existing conditions. And wow, how did I end up getting long COVID? And many times you might have had something that was lingering around, being quiet and dormant in your system. And COVID was like the match that set off the flame in your body. And suddenly you have all these things going on, and it was always there, but your immune system was strong, right? And now, because you might have been in a weakened immune state, that is where a lot of this happens. And that's why I love something like the WHPC, which helps with immunity, because it's important. There's so many things you can do for your immune system, as you know, but it's really important to keep that immune system healthy so you can start to lessen these symptoms and get back to recovery more quickly.
Yeah, it's really challenging, because what I'm finding more and more is if I suggest just what you suggested to someone, that they ask their healthcare provider to do this extra testing,
right,
they won't do it, or it's not covered. And particularly when
it's not covered. I know.
When people join these health plans, it's not, let's say I'm older. Okay. So I have Medicare, but I have straight Medicare in which I can go to any physician, including a lot of the ones who do know more. But if you join one of these plans, like there's all kinds of plans, there's like Humana and this, that, and the other one, they cut your availability to so many things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have amazing insurance, but I don't even really take advantage, because I almost solely see functional doctors, because they seem to have a better understanding of a lot of these types of things that I've experienced.
And they'll order those tests and they'll know how to read them.
Exactly. And that's really what you need. Someone who's going to, number one, listen to you and believe you and have some empathy and understanding. And two, have the knowledge, like you said, to order those proper tests. Because if you go to a regular doctor, even for myself, or even, people that I've worked with, their lab work may look pristine. If you're just doing, CBC, like comprehensive blood count, or you're looking at a glucose panel or a lipid panel, everything looks in order. But suddenly, if you're doing a viral panel, or you're checking some other like ANA, autoimmune antibodies, and you say, oh boy, that doesn't look so good. Well, that might be what we missed. And that's what a lot of these doctors are missing. So I'm totally for the medical route, but I just think you have to go to the right doctor.
Right. Which is really difficult to do, because they usually do not take health insurance, or your health insurance won't cover them. So then it gets to be really expensive.
It's a very expensive process. I don't even want to tell you what I've spent over the years trying to take care of my health, because for having Lyme and even long COVID, the only therapies that worked for me were natural therapies. I'm not using medications, and I'm I've tried some of them and they weren't successful. So for me, I find myself using solely natural therapies and really just going back to basics. And then also other things that are not covered. If you look into like hyperbaric oxygen, which can be helpful, and red light therapy and IV therapy, and you start getting into all of this, and it can be very pricey. So that's not necessary for every single person, but you start getting deeper down the rabbit hole of what actually can maybe work, but it can also be very costly.
It is, and that's unfortunate. There's actually a group called Integrative Medicine for the Underserved. And if anyone wants to visit it, it's these are the letters to find it. IM, as in Mary, the number 4, and then US. So it's IM4US. And it's a big organization that I belong to, Integrative Medicine for the Underserved. Because the thing is, a lot of the protocols and lifestyle changes and then those more advanced holistic therapies that Danielle is sharing with us, and you can find her at many places, including pashkowellness.com. And from there, I imagine they can visit your Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, all those places like I am, and all those places as well. It takes a lot of work just to keep up with all of that. I actually have somebody do that for me because I just don't have the time.
You're smart.
But, it's really hard for a person with limited resources to get these kind of therapies. But it's not hard to make your own steamed cabbage soup. That's the thing. So that's what Danielle's talking about too, because people will sometimes come, let's say, to my office with literally shopping bags full of loads of expensive bottled nutraceuticals and supplements, and they still feel terrible. And I give them a recipe for making vegetable soup, and it says on it, it would be best if you choose organic vegetables. And they say, I can't afford organic vegetables.
Right.
But you can, because an organic cabbage is like $1 a pound instead of 50 cents a pound.
Exactly. And if you go to the farmer's market and get, it's even less expensive a lot of times. So that is true. You're so right about that. I mean, really just going back to diet. I mean, that's why for people who don't have the means to do a lot of these therapies, those 6 things that I mentioned in the beginning, like the anti-inflammatory diet and the AHCC mushrooms, and even acupuncture is covered through insurance a lot of the time, and yoga and prayer and even compression therapy, even getting the compression boots, they're $100 on Amazon. Like these are not.
So tell us about that. That's something people can do on their own at home when they buy it.
Yes.
I mean, all of these go to a center.
No. I mean, there are centers that have the Normatec $1,000 boots, which I do have a pair of those, but I personally, I travel a lot and I like the lighter ones to carry with me. I've even used compression boots on a plane on an international flight, like the lady with the boots on, but they are terrific. You can, there's brands on Amazon, and they're electric and they really can help with the symptoms. So I love them because, a lot of times, especially if I can't get in a workout or do any kind of walking and I feel like I need the circulation and for myself, what I've encountered, and this happens to people who have Lyme and long COVID, or we're even seeing it with chronic fatigue syndrome. They have like an orthostatic intolerance where their blood pressure sometimes can drop and their pulse gets really high, and that can cause dizziness, or what we know as POTS syndrome. And these boots have been a lifesaver for me. So I always recommend them to people, and all of these things are not out of reach, and you don't have to go crazy, and you could do all of this at home. And if you look at my apartment, it's almost become like a wellness center with everything I have in here. I have all my gadgets, and I have really good food at home, and you do the best you can, and that's what people need to know. That you don't have to be rich to do this, and you don't have to break the bank. There are these things that you can do to start to get better.
So did you find that long COVID was something that could be dealt with and that goes away? Because I have heard from many people it seems to linger, or like Lyme, come and go.
It's it doesn't fully go away. It's something that can be managed. Maybe it will. We don't know enough about COVID. It's like a post-viral fatigue syndrome. So I've seen people have other post-viral fatigue syndromes and they eventually recovered. It's too soon in the process. I mean, I have seen some people in 9 or 10 months who say they're feeling better, and that's terrific. But Lyme's like one of those things too. You have periods where it's activated. For me, at one point, it went fully in remission. Well, I thought it did. That's before I had COVID. And then COVID was the event that created it to get activated again. So it seems like if your immune system is strong and you're in a good place and you're getting sleep and you're eating well and you're, not drinking and you're taking care of your body and not getting too stressed, you can start to manage things if you've already found you've had some kind of recovery. But things that can set you off are a few nights of not sleeping or travel or a stressful event, and these symptoms can come back. So they don't completely go away. I think you can just keep them managed. Some people seem to say they've gone away, and I hope that's the case, but for a lot of people, it's lingering.
Well, I know that's true with Lyme disease too. Sometimes it'll be years and then suddenly,
Yes.
it raises its ugly head again.
Yeah, I had a good 2 years that I was totally well, and then COVID, caused symptoms to come back again. So it's like you just have to constantly watch your body. It causes you to be more vigilant about how you take care of yourself. And if you're not used to having healthy habits, it makes you more aware of how to have them, and it's a necessity. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you use this to get yourself into a place where you're becoming healthier and you're taking care of yourself better, it may prevent other illnesses down the road.
Right. It's like a motivation. That's
exactly. So you may lose that weight that you always wanted to lose because you're, eating in a healthy way, not dieting. You may prevent yourself from possibly becoming, having blood sugar issues or becoming diabetic, or, because you're eating in such a way that you're mindful. So I think there's a lot to be learned.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for being our guest today. And people can find out more at PashkoWellness.com. And also the live links will be on the archive of this show.
Great.
And I want to thank you, listeners, so much for joining in to Herbally Yours and listening. Once again, the voice of Nassau Community College at 90.3 WHPC, and produced in the studios of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. For further information, you can email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamhi at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us again next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.